Shakti is often translated as energy, but that's not quite correct. Or rather, you have Shakti with capital S and Shakti with a small s. Small s refers to energies like prana or prana Shakti, which is somewhat the equivalent of chi, which is well known in Tai Chi and so on, Qigong. But Shakti with a capital S refers to the Divine Mother, or the grace of the Divine Mother. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean you devote yourself to some mythological figure, some deity? No, it doesn't. And in order to understand what Shakti really is, we have to explore Kundalini and explain, at least for now, what Kundalini is. You can't understand Kundalini unless you receive Shaktipat, initiation, and experience an awakened and aroused Kundalini. So, this brings us to the main topic. What is Kundalini? And what are the three phases of Kundalini? Kundalini has three phases. It can be dormant, which is the most common state of Kundalini. It keeps people in a state of ignorance. And most of you who watch this video are ignorant. And that means you do not know the nature of yourself. You're not self-realized. You're not enlightened. So accept this sad fact and do something about it. You are ignorant. Do something about it. And that brings us to the next state Kundalini can be in, and that is the awakened state. Now, you have to understand that Kundalini can either uphold your structure of ignorance, or it can deconstruct it and reconstruct your nervous system, your brain, your identity, your self-understanding, so that all those can uphold and reflect states of enlightenment. And that is what spiritual practices are about, getting enlightened. Spirituality is not about feeling good about yourself. That's ego spirituality. That does not mean you have to feel bad about yourself. But all this healing, ascended masters, channeling, and so on, blah, 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 it won't take you anywhere closer to enlightenment. There are two kinds of enlightenment. There are enlightenment states, or at least one state of enlightenment without Shakti, and that's which is commonly known as awakening or self-realization. I won't distinguish between awakening and self-realization in this video. We can do that at some other time. It's not the same. Awakening comes before self-realization. And there is this outrageously blissful state of unity consciousness, or God consciousness, which comes just before unity consciousness, where you are hopelessly in love with God in everything, and your entire body feels like it's going to explode with bliss and love of God, and you only want to merge with this divine love, grace, fullness in everything. And eventually you do merge with that and everything. That's unity consciousness. That's taking it a little far right now. So, back to Kundalini. You have to understand what Shakti is in order to understand Kundalini. And you also have to understand the various stages of enlightenment. So this is a quick presentation where you're gonna get the whole package in so many minutes. Now, the self has two aspects. Your ego is up here, ego identification, the outer world, the inner world. Here's what you think is you. Now, you can transcend that and ultimately merge into the self down here. Just above this you have I-ness, which is called a point of contraction or bindu. And this later develops into I am. And I am develops into I am this and that develops into a whole complex network of relationships between ignorant structures about who you are. This part of your mind says I am that, this part says I am that, this part says I am this, and so on and so forth in a complex network that gets you all confused to such a degree that you capitulate or are overwhelmed by it and accept the illusion that you are this complex network of garbage. It is not you. You are this down here, below the lower limit of manifestation, which we just said was bindu. Bindu means dot or a point. And the first contraction of the absolute unmanifest self is called bindu, this dot. This dot manifests as Kundalini, and Kundalini then manifests you, or rather you as an ignorant individual. It manifests your structure of personality, your emotional dispositions, your physical body, your chakras, your nadis, so on and so forth. It then goes to sleep in a place called Khanda. Now, you normally say Kundalini resides in the root chakra, but the root chakra is in the perineum, and about an inch above the perineum you have a bulb, which is called Khanda. Khanda means a bulb. It's a small blob, and within this blob Kundalini is coiled up 3.5 times and does not do anything else but uphold your state of ignorance. The job of Kundalini in the average normal ignorant person is to uphold his or her state of ignorance. So what do you do if you're on the spiritual path? You can either ignore Shakti and jump over or beyond all these levels of personality, these structures, and go into void. But there's no bliss in that. In order to get the bliss and the love and the unity consciousness, you have to realize the self not just as pure being, which is called Shiva. You also have to realize the pure being as Shakti. And the way to realize pure being as Shakti is through Kundalini. Now, in order to realize pure being as Shakti through Kundalini, you have to make Kundalini behave differently, put it into a different state, or activate a different phase of Kundalini, and this phase or state is what we call awakened. Now, asleep or awakened are of course metaphors. Kundalini does not sleep and is not awakened. It's awake all the time and it's active all the time. When you speak and when you think and when you sneeze and when you digest, it's Kundalini. Kundalini is the primal energy of everything that makes up you in every possible way and in every aspect you can imagine. But what happens when Kundalini is awakened is that it begins to restructure your nervous system so it can uphold states of enlightenment. This is incredibly fantastic that this is possible. I mean, every other path than the path of the awakened Kundalini is a path where you, as an ignorant individual, try to realize something you have no clue about at all, and that is the self. You're ignorant, therefore you do not know what the self is. So you guess and guess and guess every time you meditate what the self could be. And every time you meditate, you hope you get it this time. And every time you meditate, you get disappointed because you're guessing and fumbling in the dark. But if you can get your Kundalini awakened, and the best way to do that, the most effective way, fastest way, is through Shaktipat. If you get your Kundalini awakened, what happens is a different kind of sadhana. Suddenly the self, Shakti, in an unmanifest form, begins to reach out to you and meditate on you, so to speak. On your, but it's not you, so I can't say it meditates on you, but it meditates on the illusion of who you are and begins to restructure it, reconstruct it, so that it can reflect more and more comprehensive states of enlightenment. There are many stages of enlightenment. This video is not the right place to go into that. I've made another video about that. It's called, I don't know. Anyway, God, I'm so blissful right now, you have no idea. The self is bliss. What I'm trying to say with all my videos is the self is you. Its nature is bliss, consciousness, pure being. Satchitananda. Not in that order. Sat is pure being, Chit is consciousness, and Ananda is bliss. And if you have not realized all three aspects of the self, you're really not enlightened. You're not fully enlightened. You haven't realized the self. You're in a premature state of enlightenment. Listen to all these non-duality teachers. They talk about this void. There's no bliss, it's just void, it's empty. And they say this is the ultimate because they can't, in that state of realization where you have realized yourself as unmanifest, it's very difficult to imagine that there can be anything higher than that, because you are inclined to reject it as emotionalism, as a feeling, or some version of duality, but it's not. First you have to realize the unmanifest within, then you have to realize the unmanifest without. Just realizing it within is not advaita, which means non-duality. It's a state of non-duality within, but there is plurality without. And let's group this plurality without together so we can say clearly that there is duality in this state of enlightenment, which is very immature and very simple and basic, between void within and everything without. So the next stage is to realize the absolute and everything outside. And that goes through the phase of God consciousness, which is outrageously blissful, full of love, and then it goes into unity consciousness, where you merge yourself, understanding as unmanifest, pure love, bliss, being into everything and everybody. To take us back to Shakti, this oneness comes about through a recognition of Shakti, the dynamic creative principle of the Absolute. The Absolute, the Self, is not just void. It has also this Shakti aspect, which is dynamic creative potential. And out of this dynamic creative potential you get Kundalini, which manifests you as an individual, but which also manifests everything else. The camera, the sofa, the wall, the painting, and so on. It's all manifestations of Shakti. And Shakti is one with Shiva. It is void and bliss and so on. The way to realize this level of enlightenment is through awakening Kundalini. You cannot reach it without awakening Kundalini, because you have to have the full realization of the Absolute Self as both Shakti, which Kundalini is a contraction of, which manifests you as an ignorant individual, and pure being, which is Shiva. Then we have the third state of Kundalini, which is the aroused state. The aroused state is when the dormant or the sleeping Kundalini suddenly sends a rush of energy into your system. This energy does not necessarily go up through the spine. It can go up through the side channels, Ida and Pingala, or just wander around in the body and create a havoc. And that can be quite unpleasant. The best way to deal with it is simply to ride it off. Don't fight it. Accept it, relax into it, and meditate on it in such a way that you try to reach the void from which this unpleasant, aroused Kundalini energy erupted. And you will find this energy can be an entry point into pure being, into the self, into the Shiva-Shakti union, which is the self, which I earlier described as Sat, Chit, Ananda, which is beingness, consciousness, and bliss. So we have three states of Kundalini to sum up. We have the sleeping state, where Kundalini upholds your state of ignorance. We have the aroused state, where the sleeping Kundalini sends an unusually large amount of energy into your body, your nervous system, and that can be quite unpleasant. It can also be very pleasant and give rise to intense sort of so-called cosmic orgasms and ecstasies, but it has nothing to do with the ananda of the self. Please note that. And then we have the awakened state of Kundalini, where Kundalini actively restructures your body and your nervous system in such a way that it can uphold a state where the self is lived fully in this incarnation that you currently, in a vague sort of minor residue of ignorance, consider yourself to be. You know it's not you. I'm not Yan. I'm not this body. You're not you. You're not who you think you are. That's an illusion. This body will die and I will live on. This mind will disintegrate, will die, I will live on. This personality will eventually die, crumble, disintegrate. I will continue to exist as a fully self-conscious, aware entity of pure being, consciousness and bliss, because I have realized my essential nature. And that statement does not make sense because I said my essential nature, but there is no one who owns that essential nature. It is just here, now, and it is outrageously intense bliss. So I will do a short transmission, as I always do when I end my videos. It'll be like 5 minutes. Look here. Relax. Don't think about what you see on the screen. Don't evaluate what you see. Look into my state of silence, of bliss, if you are disturbed by thoughts, gently put your awareness to your breath, your breathing. Notice body breathes by itself. Follow the in-breath and the out-breath for a short while. And then gently, gently, silently sink into the void that precedes the breath and lies unmoving behind the breath, behind thoughts, behind feelings, and behind any notion you can have of who you are. For a short while, give up the notion that you are who you think you are, and rest into silence. Within this body that you are looking at a video recording of, which goes by the name of Jan, there is only silence. Try to tune into that and merge with it, and Shaktipat may take place through this video. remember you are already perfect. You are, so to speak, already enlightened. You just don't know it. And that's a good definition of what ignorance is, and what is, or rather what the state you're in is when you have a dormant or sleeping Kundalini.